Divine promise on the brink of ruin, a sacred lineage threatened by injustice, sin, and tragedy. Have you ever wondered what happens when men destined for greatness choose corruption instead of faith, when the silence of heaven is broken by a devastating verdict, and when a seemingly forgotten woman decides to defy her fate? Today, we are going to dive into one of the most shocking, controversial, and surprisingly powerful stories in the Bible, a family drama hidden in the shadows, which many prefer to forget. The story of Judah, his sons, and a woman named Tamar, who was willing to face everything to preserve the divine promise. What Tamar did defies our conventional understanding of justice and morality, but you will discover that the invisible hand of God often operates in the most unexpected places and through the most unlikely people. Prepare for a revealing journey full of twists. What you are about to hear is not just an ancient biblical story. It is a profound reflection of God's relentless grace and our own humanity. Stay until the end, because the conclusion of this story can completely change the way you see God's silent and sovereign work in your own life. To unravel the tragedy that befell Judah's house, we need to understand the ground on which the seeds were sown. Judah, Jacob's fourth son, was a man of strength and leadership, but also of notable flaws. He was one of the brothers who orchestrated Joseph's sale into slavery, a blemish on his youth. Now established in the land of Canaan, he seeks to build his own life. But Judah makes a decision that echoes the stubbornness of his own ancestors and breaks a fundamental directive for the people of the promise. He marries a Canaanite woman, the daughter of a man named Shua. Remember, the patriarchs Abraham and Isaac were explicitly warned against marrying Canaanite women, for they would bring with them the idolatry and spiritual corruption of their culture. Rebekah, Jacob's mother, had lamented Esau's choice of Hittite wives, knowing the heartache they would bring. Nevertheless, Judah, the father of a crucial messianic lineage, opts for this controversial union. It is in this scenario of diluted spiritual compromise, of faith mixed with the pagan influences of Canaan, that Judah and Shua's three sons are born, Onan, and Shelah. Each of them heirs of an immense promise, but also born into a divided home where the traditions of Abraham clashed with the Canaanite gods and customs. The firstborn was the principal heir. His birth should have been an event of pure celebration. As the firstborn, he held not only the right to a double portion of the material inheritance, but more importantly, the spiritual and moral leadership of the family after his father's death. He was the initial link, the embodiment of the continuity of the divine promise that would come to David and ultimately to the Messiah. The weight of a sacred destiny rested on his young shoulders. Judah, like any father, wished to see his children established with their own families. When the time came, he found a wife for Tamar. The name Tamar in Hebrew means palm tree, a tree known for its uprightness, dignity, and resilience. She was a woman of grace and beauty, from a respected family. Judah believed she would bring honor to his home. The wedding was a grand event with music and festivities. Tamar, veiled and dressed in fine garments, was led to Er's home, believing she was entering a new life of love and security. But what she found was far from a paradise. The story of is a chilling silence in the scriptures, punctuated by a devastating verdict. The Bible does not describe the details of his childhood or youth, nor the specific acts of his wickedness, but the conclusion is undeniable. Was a cruel and perverse man. He had a hardened heart, showed no kindness to Tamar. Instead of loving her, he mistreated her. He was selfish, concerned only with his own desires, disregarding God's laws and his father's wisdom. Tamar, though young, was perceptive. She noticed the darkness in Er's heart and undoubtedly prayed for a change. But his wickedness only worsened. Did things that displeased God, things that dishonored his family and disrespected the sacred bond of marriage. Judah, though perhaps not aware of the full extent of Er's actions, began to notice disturbing signs. His son had become reckless, disrespectful, and arrogant. Neighbors whispered about Er's behavior, and even the servants of the house feared his temper. Then, without warning, tragedy struck. She asked for his signet ring, his cord, and his staff. These were not mere objects. They were symbols of his identity, authority, and possession. The signet ring was used to seal documents and ensure their authenticity. The cord likely held it around his neck, and the staff, an extension of his own person, often carried personal markings that identified its owner. Judah agreed without hesitation, thinking it was a small price to pay for the pleasure he sought. They lay together that night, and when the act was consummated, Judah left, promising to send the goat as payment later. Tamar, now with the items of proof she needed, returned to her father's house, hiding her actions from everyone. Time passed, months dragged on, and Tamar's belly began to grow. Judah soon sent the goat with his friend Hira to redeem his signet ring, cord, and staff, as promised. But when Hira arrived in the city, he searched for the woman, asking the local residents, but no one knew of any cult prostitute by the roadside. The woman had disappeared without a trace. Judah, unaware that the woman he had slept with was Tamar, was ashamed and decided to drop the matter, thinking he would simply lose the items. However, about 3 months later, news reached Judah. "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has committed adultery and is pregnant." The villagers began to gossip, and Tamar's honor was at risk. Judah, shocked and enraged, ordered her to be brought out for punishment. The punishment for adultery at that time was death, often by burning. The drama reached its climax. Would Tamar be punished for a betrayal that, paradoxically, was an act of faithfulness to the covenant? At the decisive moment, when Tamar was being led away to be executed, she revealed her strategy. With an act of supreme courage, she sent Judah the same objects he had given her as a pledge: the signet ring, the cord, and the staff. Along with them came a bold and powerful declaration: "I am pregnant by the man to whom these things belong. Please recognize whose these are: this signet, this cord, and this staff." Imagine the scene: Judah, surrounded by a tense crowd, about to pronounce the death sentence upon his daughter-in-law. He receives the items. Seeing them, he recognizes them instantly. A deathly silence falls over the crowd as he holds each piece in his hands. The tension is palpable. The life of Tamar and the child she carried hang by a thread. Then, before everyone, Judah makes one of the most remarkable and courageous confessions in the Bible. He offers no excuses. He does not shift the blame. He does not try to cover up his failure. He simply acknowledges with humility and visible remorse, "She is more righteous than I, because I did not give her to my son Shelah." This is a public confession, a moment of profound humility and recognition. Judah admits not only that he had relations with Tamar, but that he had failed to fulfill his obligation under the law of levirate marriage. His statement, "She is more righteous than I," is deeply significant. He recognizes that although Tamar's methods were unconventional and shocking to common morality, her intention was just and righteous, to preserve the family lineage and uphold God's divine purpose. The morality of her action in the biblical context was not based on the form, but on her motivation to fulfill the divine promise. Tamar is spared. Her life and the lives of the children she carried are saved. Judah, in his act of humility, restores justice. The story of Tamar and Judah does not stop at confession and recognition. It culminates in an event during Tamar's childbirth that subverts natural expectations and reveals a profound pattern of divine providence. Tamar, the woman who defied fate, would now give birth to the future links of the promise. When the moment of birth arrived, Tamar received a surprise. She was pregnant with twins. During labor, one of the babies extends his hand. The midwife, trying to mark the firstborn, who held the special rights and blessing of primogeniture, ties a scarlet thread around the baby's wrist and declares, "This one came out first." The natural order seemed confirmed, but then something unexpected happens. The baby pulls his hand back, and his brother is born first, breaking through the barrier of birth. And so the child who was born first is named Perez, which means breakthrough or bursting forth. The other, marked by the scarlet thread, is named Zerah, which means brightness or dawn. Shock of the breakthrough. This is not a minor detail. It is an event loaded with profound symbolism, and that echoes a recurring pattern in how God operates throughout all of biblical history. Zerah, marked by the red thread, seemed to be the chosen one, the obvious firstborn. But Perez breaks through, is born first, and takes the place of the firstborn. A divine inversion that challenges human logic and the primacy of the first. Think of the previous examples in the Bible. Abel is chosen over Cain, Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, Joseph instead of his older brothers, although he was not the firstborn. David is anointed king instead of his older, stronger, and more experienced brothers. Likewise, Perez, the result of an unlikely union, born from an audacious plan devised by a determined widow in a scandalous situation, becomes the crucial link in the messianic lineage. From him would come the leaders of the tribe of Judah, and centuries later, King David himself. The story of and Tamar reveals a powerful and somewhat disturbing divine principle. When God's plan A seems to fail due to human disobedience, God is already working on plan B. And often this plan B is even more glorious, more surprising, and more revealing of his grace and sovereignty than the original plan could have been if human failure had not occurred. Judah's firstborn died without leaving direct offspring. His name is rarely mentioned in later biblical genealogies. For many readers, he is just a tragic footnote in the narrative of salvation. However, his legacy is paradoxically grand, not for what he accomplished, but for the empty space his absence created. His death unleashed a chain of events that exposed Onan's wickedness, Judah's fear, Tamar's courage and unwavering faith, and above all, God's unyielding faithfulness to his eternal purpose. Her symbolizes the man who was given everything, position, privilege, promise, and who lost everything because of sin and disobedience. His story is a solemn warning about the responsibility that accompanies spiritual privilege. Perhaps the greatest lesson from Er's story is this: no one is indispensable to God's plan, but everyone is invited to be part of it. The Lord will accomplish his purposes with or without our cooperation, but he invites us to actively participate in his work, often in the most improbable moments and through paths we would never expect. The divine tapestry does not stop at the story of Judah and Tamar. It unfolds through generations, showing the persistence of God's promise. The Book of Ruth, a narrative of love, loyalty, and redemption, continues the messianic lineage vividly and movingly. Perez fathered Hezron, who fathered Ram. From Ram came Amminadab, who fathered Nahshon, and Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz, a man of exemplary character who married Ruth, the Moabite woman, another foreign woman included in the lineage, defying expectations and showing the inclusivity of God's plan. From Ruth and Boaz was born Obed, the father of Jesse, who in turn was the father of David, the great king of Israel, the man after God's own heart. And to David an eternal promise was made, that his throne would be established forever, and that a descendant of his would reign eternally. May God bless you abundantly, and we will see you in the next study, where we will continue to unveil the secrets hidden in plain sight. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Genesis 38:7. A single concise sentence, a final and absolute verdict, no detailed explanation of his wickedness, no chance for redemption, just the overwhelming weight of a divine sentence. He was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and so the Lord removed him from the land of the living. The exact manner of his death is a mystery. Some believe it was a sudden illness, others whispered about divine judgment. The biblical truth, however, is unequivocal. Had provoked the wrath of the Lord, and his perversity had caused his own destruction. Tamar, now a widow, grieved deeply. She had barely begun her life as a wife and already found herself alone. But according to the custom of her people, her story had not ended. Judah, as head of the family, had a decision to make. The law of levirate marriage, an ancient and sacred tradition, stipulated that if a man died without children, his brother should marry the widow and father offspring in the deceased's name. This would ensure the continuity of the deceased man's lineage, preventing his name from being blotted out from Israel. And so Judah turned to his second son, Onan. "You must take Tamar as your wife," he said. "It is your duty to give her children, so that your brother's name will not be forgotten." Onan assented, but in his heart he did not like the idea. He would take Tamar, but he had no intention of honoring his brother's legacy. His selfishness would be his own undoing. Onan knew that if Tamar had children, they would not be counted as his. They would belong to heir's lineage, inheriting heir's portion of the family's wealth. This meant that Onan's inheritance would be smaller, and he would have less power in the household. Why should he raise children for a dead man? Nevertheless, he could not openly refuse his father. Disobeying Judah would bring shame, and he was not ready to face that. So he said, "Yes, father," but in his heart he had already made his decision. That night Tamar was brought to Onan. Silence hung in the house as she entered Onan's chambers, her face veiled and her heart heavy. Although she had lost she had not lost hope. Perhaps Onan would be different. Perhaps he would honor the law and treat her with kindness. But Onan had other plans. Although he took her as his wife, he made sure that she would never conceive. Each time he was with her, he spilled his semen on the ground, refusing to give her a child. Tamar at first did not understand. She had done everything a wife was supposed to do, but month after month, there was no child. She watched Onan closely and soon realized the truth. He had no intention of giving her a child. Her heart burned with anger and sadness. One night, as the oil lamps flickered in the darkness, she confronted him. "Why do you do this to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You took me as your wife, but you refused to give me a child. Do you not fear the Lord?" Onan smiled smugly. "Why should I raise children for He is dead and I am alive. I will not let his name be greater than mine." Tamar's eyes filled with tears. She had been given to two brothers, and both had treated her with cruelty. Did no one fear God? Did no one care about justice? But Onan did not listen to her. Night after night, he continued his betrayal, acting as if he obeyed the law, while secretly ensuring that Er's name would disappear from history. He thought no one saw what he was doing, believed he could outsmart God. But the Lord, who sees all things, was watching, and he was not pleased. And what he did was evil in the sight of the Lord, so he put him to death also. Genesis 38:10. Like his brother, Onan fell. The house erupted in cries of pain and fear. Judah was speechless. He had lost two sons, both struck down by the Lord. Tamar, widowed for the second time, remained silent. She had done nothing wrong, but she remained without a husband, without children, and without hope. Her situation, once again, a mirror of injustice. Judah, looking at Tamar with suspicious eyes, began to wonder, was she cursed? He could not explain why his two sons had died after marrying her. And now, according to custom, she should marry his third son, Shelah. But Shelah was still young. If he gave him to Tamar, would he also die? Judah's fear outweighed his sense of duty. He turned to Tamar, his voice cautious. "Go back to your father's house. Remain a widow until Shelah is old enough to marry." Tamar looked up, searching his face. She knew what he was doing. He was sending her away, avoiding his responsibility. He had no intention of giving her Shelah. But what could she do? She had no power, no voice against the head of the house, so she lowered her head and left, a forgotten widow. Tamar returned to her father's house carrying her sorrow. She obeyed Judah's command, living as a widow, dressed in mourning clothes, waiting for the day when Shelah would be given to her. But that day never came. Years passed. Shelah grew up, reached marriageable age, and Tamar watched from a distance, waiting. But Judah did not call her. He had lied. He had broken his promise. Tamar realized the cruel truth. Judah had abandoned her. He had no intention of fulfilling the law of levirate marriage. He had left her to wither as a forgotten widow, without a husband, without children, without justice. The divine promise of the lineage seemed to be at risk, not for supernatural causes now, but due to her father's human failure. Anger and determination rose in her heart. She would not allow this injustice to prevail. She would not allow herself to be erased, discarded like a broken vessel. If Judah would not give her what was rightfully hers, she would take matters into her own hands. And so she began to plan. One day, Tamar learned that Judah, recently widowed of his Canaanite wife, would travel to Timnah for the shearing of his sheep. Shearing was a time of feasting and celebration, but also, for many shepherds, an opportunity for indulgence and pleasure. Tamar saw her chance. She learned that he would pass through her village, and she devised a plan that would shock common morality, but which, in her context, was a desperate cry for justice. She removed her widow's garments, symbols of her mourning and her disadvantaged position. Instead, she dressed like a woman of the night, a cult prostitute, a common figure among the Canaanites, who sat by the roadsides offering their services as part of fertility rituals or simply for profit. She covered her face with a veil, hiding her identity, and headed for the road where Judah would pass, at the entrance of Enaim, a strategic location. Judah, oblivious to Tamar's plan, was traveling with his friend Hira, the Adullamite. He saw a woman sitting by the roadside, her face veiled, and assumed she was a prostitute. The sight of Tamar, deliberately seductive in her camouflage, was perfect. She knew Judah would be blinded by his desires and would not recognize her. She had thought of everything, and now everything depended on her courage to execute the plan. As Judah approached, he stopped his donkey and spoke to her. "Come, let me lie with you," he said, thinking she was a woman who could be paid for his pleasure. Tamar, playing the part of the prostitute, smiled and replied, "What will you give me in exchange for my services?" Thus, the messianic lineage, born of scandal, faith, and redemption, relentlessly advances, through imperfect men and women, but through a perfect God, until it reaches Jesus, the Christ, the Son of David, the Savior of the world. When we open the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew begins with a powerful declaration, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the Son of David, the Son of Abraham. And right in Matthew 1:3, we find a surprising detail, almost a sigh of relief on the part of the evangelist, a testimony to the grace of God that operates in ways we would never expect. Judah fathered Perez and Zerah by Tamar. In a long list of male names, Tamar is one of the few women explicitly mentioned in Jesus' genealogy. Why? Because her act of courage and faith, her relentless pursuit of justice, and the continuation of the promise preserved the messianic lineage at a crucial moment when the men, Judah, Onan, and even Shelah by omission, had failed. She became the unlikely matriarch, the silent heroine who ensured the continuity of God's plan. The story that began with wickedness culminates centuries later in the birth of the Savior. Where sin abounded, grace abounded much more. From death, God brought forth life. From injustice came justice. From human failure came divine redemption. This is the pattern that repeats throughout the biblical narrative and reaches its climax on the cross of Christ. The story of reminds us that all of us have a role in God's plan. We can follow Er's path, squandering our privileges and failing in our responsibility. Or we can follow Tamar's example, who fought for justice and the continuation of the promise, even when all seemed lost and the odds were against her. Interestingly, the name means watcher, but he did not watch his own heart. His example invites us to examine our attitudes, our choices, and our character. And above all, it reminds us that even when we fail, God remains faithful. His plan of redemption continues to advance, often through paths we would never expect. And you, did you already know the story of and Tamar with this depth and these twists? Share in the comments what touched you most in this dramatic narrative and what it taught you about God's unwavering faithfulness. If this video has unveiled new meaning for you and touched your heart, leave your like. This helps us bring these transforming truths to more people. And to not miss any of our next explorations, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Because this is just one of many truths hidden in the scriptures that can change everything we thought we knew.